Hi everyone, and welcome to I'm Alright. My name is Lisa Robertson, and this is a YouTube channel that's designed to help new and aspiring writers take their writing to the next level. I'm going to give you the skill set and mindset help that you need in order to take your novel from draft to done. I am an editorial director. I'm also a writer of fiction and nonfiction, so I feel like I have a lot of really helpful information I can share with everybody. I'm super excited to get to do that. This is the first day of a new series. This will be a 7-day series talking about kind of the 7 elements that are critical to your novel's success. What I mean by that is if these things are good, if these 7 things are good, your book is going to be good almost by default. So these are really 7 important overarching things that you need to really focus on in order to make your writing and your novel the best that it can be. The first one how we're going to do this, I'll back up a little bit. How we're going to do this each day is not only talk about what that element is and what are the important things to focus on within that element. I'm also going to try to give you an example of a piece of literature that most people are familiar with that I think really embodies the best of that trait, okay? So today we're going to get started with the first thing. The first critical element, which I think a lot of the other elements, kind of all the other elements spring from. So that this is why it's so important that you focus on this first, and that is the plot of your novel. The plot of your novel, quite simply, is just the story from A to Z, right? It's everything that happens within your novel. It involves the characters and what they do. It involves the setting. It involves, my gosh, I lost my train of thought. This happens to me so often, but I'm going to keep going. It involves the conflict. It involves everything. Everything springs from that. So what is it important for you to consider within your novel as far as plot goes, right? Here's some things you need to make sure that happens right away in order to have a strong plot. You need to jump into the action and to the story pretty quickly. You do not want a lot of backstory. You do not want a lot of exposition. You want the reader to know from the beginning, what is this story about? What do the characters have to gain or lose? What are the central conflicts between these characters? Where is this novel happening in time and also in place? And where are they going to go? What is their journey from A to B? That's important that you get into all those things and establish those things right away. You also want to make sure in your plot that you sustain this throughout the novel, right? It can be really easy to have a great beginning and a great end. The middle is where it quite often gets murky and problematic for people. I know that's the case for me. So I want you to think about that. Make sure that you can have beginnings, middles, and ends for your plots and your subplots, which your subplots may run for the entire length of your novel, or they may only be for a short period of time. But every plot and subplot needs to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and needs to serve a purpose. Whether that's comic relief, if you have a heavy story, you have like a subplot that kind of lightens the mood, or whatever it is, you need to make sure that those all are covered from beginning, middle to end, okay? Plot, obviously, is your main character. Is there a main character, your protagonist, and an antagonist? Is there beef or conflict quickly established? And is it carried throughout the novel? Is your plot, is your idea for this novel big enough to sustain a minimum of 80,000 words? If this is an adult novel, 80 to 90 is probably where you're going to want to be. So is this a big story? Does this cover a lot of time and space? Or does it have enough richness and enough nuances and enough things going on that it can handle all that, okay? Gosh, this is getting dark. I don't know if it's like... Anyway, I'm not going to worry about that. All right, so that's another thing you need to worry about. Let's go on now to talking about a novel that I think that most people are familiar with that I think has a great plot. And I'm going to talk about... I've read this novel... I can't even tell you how many times, and I love it. It's one of my absolute favorites. It's Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, a Pulitzer Prize winner from the 80s, okay? This novel, if you're not familiar with it, go get it and read it because it's wonderful. But there is a clear overall plot for this story, right? It's these 2 retired Texas Rangers who are going to assemble this huge herd of cattle, and take them up to Montana, where there is no cattle ranches. That is the overarching plot of the novel. And everything that they do and all the characters are tangentially involved in that for the most part, okay? But there are also numerous subplots within the novel. You have the overarching story of Call and Gus and their mission to kind of get some excitement in their life and go from this tiny, dusty South Texas town with this huge herd of cattle and kind of relive their youth in a way. And you also have a bunch of subplots in this novel. You have Carl's relationship with his illegitimate son that he just cannot bring himself to claim. You have Gus's relationship with the town prostitute who goes on the journey with them, and also with Clara, a woman from his past who he stops and visits along the way. You have the character of Jake Spoon, a former comrade of theirs, another former Texas Ranger who's kind of had a fall from grace, and his journey from kind of like this heroic character to this not so heroic character. July, the sheriff from Arkansas, chasing first Jake and then later on his wife, you know, all over the Midwest and the American West. So you have all these stories going on that all relate kind of to the overall story, and they all serve a purpose, and they all enrich the characters, and they all enhance the story. And that's why it's such a great plot. And they're all resolved. They might not all be resolved favorably. I'll tell you right now, they're not. They're not all resolved in a way that's satisfying to the reader, but they all exist and have a beginning, middle, and end. Some that span the entire novel, some that happen within a short period of time. But it is this epic story, but of these very intimate relationships in addition to this huge undertaking that they're doing. And that's why I think it's such a complex and satisfying and aspirational plot. I hope that was helpful to you. That's all I have for today. I'll be back tomorrow with another key element that you need to focus on. I apologize again for the going in and out of shade on this. Oy vey. Bear with me. I'm doing the best I can. I'll talk to you tomorrow.